Raider Nation, good morning. It's Mitchell Renz here, host of the Raiders Reporter, and this is my final 53-man roster projection for the Silver and Black. Also, at the very end of today's show, I'm going to discuss the practice squad that I believe that this team is going to put together. Now, let me be very clear. This is not the 53-man that I personally would do. Quite frankly, there are a few players that I would not keep on this team. The way that I'm doing this, though, is I'm going to be thinking about what Pete Carroll and what John Spytek are going to do for this team. Also, I really wanted to be able to do this one yesterday, but with all the craziness that happened with the signing of Amari Cooper, with the trade of Kenny Pickett, we went live on the Raiders Report last night. I was here probably a good 15 hours in total, and a huge shout out to each and every one of y'all that pulled up with us last night. But guess what? All gas, no brakes. We got commitment to excellence here, and we're going to be going live at 2 p.m. Eastern time. This is 2 hours before we typically go live on Tuesday, and we're going to be talking about all the roster moves, and there's a lot of stuff going on right now around the NFL. If the Silver and Black make a roster cut, I'm going to be making a video about it. The team's got to get down to 53 men. If my math is mathing correctly, we still have to move on from 20 players in total. Let's go to the quarterback room here, and the numbers that you're going to see next to these players is going to be me counting out essentially the 53-man. So number one's going to be Geno. You'll be able to see that he's the number one. I'm just literally counting out the 53 guys with you. But now we have 4 quarterbacks on this roster, and the big move that happened late last night was the Raiders. They ended up making a trade for Browns quarterback Kenny Pickett, and it ended up being a 5th-round pick. I want people to realize that, yes, this is a little bit of an overpay in my personal opinion, but you felt like you had to overpay because you want to have a backup quarterback. I think that this also is a okay deal because you're going to get an additional 5th-round comp pick, and you're going to get that because of the Nate Hobbs move by letting him go and test free agency. So you're not losing your 5th. You're losing one of your 5th-round picks, and honestly, I could see this end up being the comp pick. But with this trade, the Raiders are now not going to keep Aidan O'Connell, and I think that that's one of the things that we have to realize why they did it. They upgraded at the quarterback 2 spot. That is a clear fact. Kenny Pickett is a better quarterback than Aidan O'Connell, and the Raiders also believe in this staff to be able to develop a quarterback because every person that is on this staff, from John Spytek to Pete Carroll to Greg Olsen, has helped former first-rounders, help guys that have been castaways and turn them into, honestly, franchise quarterbacks. Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield are great examples of that. But now with Aidan, I think what you're going to see is they are going to come up with an injury settlement, and he is no longer going to be a member of this team. It doesn't make sense to keep him on the roster because if it's 6 to 8 weeks, then after 6 to 8 weeks, if he's still not ready to go and you put him on short-term IR, then you can put him on IR for the whole year, and then he's done for the season. So I think the best option for AOC, test somewhere else, and they're going to come up with an injury settlement, but no more Aidan O'Connell on the Raiders. Let's go to the running back room now, and the one name that is no longer on this team that already got cut yesterday is Chris Collier, so he's already been shipped off. So essentially, in my opinion, you're kind of evaluating between Dylan Laube, Sincere McCormick, and Raheem Mostert of who's going to be those other running backs. Because to me, it's Ashton Jeanty, Zamir White. Those are your top 2 guys. And I was very impressed by the way Zamir played. Hell, I was calling him Zeus in that final preseason game. So to me, I'm going to keep Raheem Mostert. He still offers you some ability in the pass-catching game, but I'm also going to keep Dylan Laube. And the reason why I'm going to keep Laube is because of what he offers you in terms of special teams. And when you look at all these running backs here, if it was up to me, I would keep Sincere McCormick. But I think that Laube is going to get the nod because he offers a little bit more in special teams, and the Raiders are just so confident in Ashton Jeanty and Zamir White. Let's go to the running back room, or wide receiver room now, and Amari Cooper was signed yesterday. And I got home late last night, and my wife was like, I want you to like Amari Cooper. He's my favorite player, and I'm hoping that Amari turns out to be a solid dude. I will say this, I don't mind the contract. It's a 1-year deal worth up to the maximum value of $6 million. I think that is a very fair deal for Amari. What scares me, though, is I don't want that deal to mean that we are moving on from Jakobi Meyers, who requested a trade. At this current moment, Jakobi is a wide receiver on this team. At this current moment, I want Jakobi Meyers to be a part of this team. And I don't blame Jakobi for doing what he did. And I say that only because he did everything right this offseason, and the fact that we're still sitting here without a contract extension is a little bit frustrating, I think, on both parties. And when I say both parties, I mean my party, like me. It's frustrating, and I understand that it's frustrating for Jakobi, but this trade request is him not wanting to be a Raider. This is him saying, hey, either pay me or trade me away. Pay me my worth, and I fully understand him doing that. Also, this trade rumor happened yesterday, and I ended up doing a video on it, and I'm not going to lie to you. It scares the hell out of me. This is like Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis type bad, if this is just Kyle Duggar straight up for Jakobi Meyers. But with that being said, I am going to end up keeping Jakobi, obviously, on this 53, and I'm going to end up keeping 6 receivers in total. I'm not going to lie to you. To me, I think the Amari Cooper signing is more to do with, like, Tommy Mellott and his inability in terms of, like, his development this offseason. I don't think that going out and signing Amari means that we're going to move on from Jakobi. I've been wrong before, and I'll be wrong again, and we're going to see what ends up happening here with this receiver room. It's going to be something to monitor all day. It's going to be something that I'm talking about live all day. I guarantee you that. But to me, you're going to keep 6 receivers because technically Tommy Mellott is just a developmental project. And yes, he is a receiver, but he is not going to see the field this season. And I think the only way that he sees the field this season is if there are several different injuries to this organization. So with that, I'm keeping 6 wide receivers. Let's go to the tight end room now, and I think this one's pretty cut and dry if I'm being 100% transparent with you. You know, I thought Alberto did some good stuff. I think Carter Runyon's a fun story, and I think Runyon is absolutely a player that I want to be able to figure out a way to keep him on this practice squad. But with the Raiders wide receiver room and with this Raiders tight end room, you know, I challenged Ian Thomas last week, and I was, you know, kind of ripping him apart a little bit for his drops, for his lack of concentration. And with that, I'm going to keep 3 tight ends. I'm going to go Brock Bowers, Michael Mayer, and Ian Thomas. The Raiders this preseason ran the most 11 personnel in the National Football League. And I know we talk about 12 personnel a lot with the 2 tight end sets, but this offense looks like they're going to run a ton, and I mean a ton of 11 personnel. And I did speak to a source literally bright and early this morning that said one of the reasons why you could see the Raiders entertain that Jakobi Meyers trade idea is because of how confident they are in Brock Bowers to be that true number 1. And by putting Bowers out there at the outside as a true number 1, that also allows Michael Mayer to get on the field a little bit more as a tight end. So I think that that's also got to go into the equation of why the Raiders maybe don't end up paying Jakobi and why they could end up trading him today or even tomorrow. My question to you is this, though, because anytime we talk about roster cuts, you know, people got to make decisions, whether it's the head coach, whether it's the GM, and I think that this is a really good dynamic duo. Back in the Gruden days, it was Gruden. Back in the McDaniel days, it was Josh McDaniels. But I'm hoping that the answer here is actually John Spytek. But I want to know from you, who has the final say? Pete Carroll, John Spytek? Let me know down below. My answer coming up here after this YouTube ad break. I'm going to sit up here and go, I hope that it is a legitimate marriage. And I hope that Pete Carroll and John, they talk about things, and I hope it's almost a situation where like, all right, Pete, you get to keep that guy, but that means I get to keep this guy. If it was up to me, though, that's your general manager's job. Your general manager's job is to be able to figure out which players you're going to go out there. It's the coach's job to be able to make sure that those guys are doing the right things. I think good organizations let the GM do it. If it was up to me, I would also let John Spytek do it. Let's now look at the Raiders' offensive line, and you know this one is this one's a little bit interesting. I'm not going to lie. There's a lot of different names, a lot of different situations we could go with here, and I'm a very honest person, and you know, like I originally had 10 offensive linemen making this squad. After a few of the moves yesterday, after a few of the things that ended up happening, because I ended up keeping an extra receiver, I planned on only keeping 5 receivers. Well, now I kept 6. So what I had to end up doing is I had to cut a offensive lineman, and the offensive lineman that I ended up cutting is Laki Tassi. I'll tell you this right now, I flippin' hate the idea of Thayer Munford making this team because he stinks. And quite frankly, I wish that they would actually give the opportunity to Laki Tassi. The problem is, though, Tassi is an offensive guard. I think what the Raiders are going to try to do is they're going to try to keep him for the practice squad. You can keep him on the practice squad because he's the International Pathway Program player. He makes the practice squad, and you keep him on the team. But I'll be transparent here, and I hope that there's not another NFL team that watches this video. I don't think there is going to be another NFL team that watches this video. I would put in a claim for Tassi. Tassi will end up being a good offensive lineman. He is very inexperienced, but he's just a gigantic human being, and he's a good athlete for how big he is on that interior. And I think because he came over from Philadelphia, and we have a lot of Eagles people now in that front office with Brandon Hunt and Anthony Patch, like I think that they saw something in, Jordan Mellott, and they were like, hey, I can make this guy, also Laki Tassi, turn into a solid offensive lineman because he came in as a defensive tackle. It sucks a little bit, but I think that this team's going to keep Thayer Munford because for whatever reason, they look like that they're in love with Thayer Munford. Coming up next here on the show, we're going to get into the defensive side of the football, and this was maybe a little bit less interesting because of all the moves the Raiders made yesterday, but I'll be honest, I'm looking at this defense in terms of who those coaches are going to be cutting way closer because I have so many extra question marks around the defensive side of the football compared to the offensive side of the football. It's me just being very, very transparent with you. Also, I'm going to be transparent with you. I play PrizePicks every single weekend, and my wife, she's actually going to Paris. She's going to be gone for like 10 days. This weekend, the amount of PrizePicks action that I'm going to be getting in, she's going to be like, you've been on your phone a lot. I'm like, yeah, I'm playing a lot of PrizePicks. And this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. And football, man, it's so flipping back. Don't miss any of the action this football season. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. PrizePicks offers Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. PrizePicks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. So like I mentioned, a lot of college football. We're going to go more on Arch Manning on the rushing, receiving touchdown, and then we're going to go less on the passing yards from Garrett Nussmeier. This is from our Chat Sports team of what they're rolling with here for PrizePicks, and if you want to roll with that lineup, then download the PrizePicks app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That is code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Let's go to the defensive ends now on this roster, and I do not agree with the Raiders moving on from Andre Carter. I want to be very, very clear in that. I wanted to be able to keep him on this 53. I thought he deserved a shot based on some of the other players that we have on this roster. Now, I also want to say that Tonka Hemingway, some of you are going to be like, Mitch, he's a defensive tackle. I'm just keeping him at defensive end because that's how the Raiders listed him in their depth chart. I agree with you that he's probably a DT, and once we get an updated depth chart, I'll start moving some of these players around. I just wanted to be clear of why you see Tonka Hemingway where you do. So for me, I'm going to end up keeping 5 defensive ends, basically 4 defensive ends. Tonka's going to play DT, and one of the interesting things that you've seen the Raiders do a little bit this offseason, and they did it in that final preseason game against Arizona. 1 defensive end, Max Crosby. 3 defensive tackles. And I think that that's going to be a front that they go with a lot of times, and they're going to throw out 5-man fronts. They're going to throw out 4-man fronts. They're going to throw out, I think, sometimes where it's like Malcolm Kuntz, Tyree Wilson, Max Crosby. And then on the next rep, it's going to be Max Crosby, Tonka Hemingway, Thomas Booker, and Adam Butler. Like, they're going to mix and match a ton. But right now, we're up to 30 players on our 53. Let's go to the big guys on the interior now. I love the trade that the Raiders did for Thomas Booker. He is our second best defensive tackle next to Adam Butler, and I think in a year or two, I wouldn't be surprised if he was the best defensive tackle that we had on our roster from top to bottom. Now, because of the injury to Leki Fotu, I haven't been talking about him as much, but he looks healthy. The Raiders are excited about him. He's out of that walking boot, so I ended up keeping him on this squad, and it really came down for me personally between Fotu and Zach Carter, and I wanted to be able to figure out a way how to keep Carter on this team, and I'll be transparent. If you told me the Raiders keep Zach Carter and I'm not going to be upset about it. Like, I could make the argument of why they would go ahead and do it, but to me, I decided to keep 10 defensive linemen overall. If I really thought about keeping Zach Carter over Charles Snowden. It's something that I probably would have done. I'm not the biggest fan of Snowden, but because of the roster construction, I decided to go this route. Let's now talk about the linebackers. And the Raiders have already moved on from Amari Gaynor. They've already moved on from Jalen Smith and a few other linebackers on this squad. To me, Jamal Adams, Jermaine Pratt, Landon Roberts, Devin White, these guys are all locks to make this team. What really gets interesting is between Cody Lindenberg, Tommy Eichenberg, and Matt Jones. I've reached out to a few sources in regards to Cody Lindenberg and said, hey, is he going to make the team? And I'll be very transparent. It is, I don't think it's looking very good for him right now. Obviously, circumstances can change, but to me, I think that this team likes Tommy Eichenberg a little bit more, and because of that, I'm going to end up keeping Eichenberg. So I know that the Raiders drafted Lindenberg in the 7th round. I would like to give him a little bit more opportunities because you can see that he's learning, and he kind of reminds me of the way Tommy Eichenberg looked, last season, where you could tell that he was a rookie, and you could tell that he's going to go through some learning pains. So to me, I'm somebody where I'm going to go, all right, if this is the route that we're going to go, this is the route we're going to go, but I'm going to end up keeping 5 linebackers. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to keep anything more than that, and because of that, I'm keeping 5 linebackers because I want to be able to keep some extra players on this secondary. Let's go to the secondary. A lot of question marks. It was reported earlier today by Jordan Schultz that the Raiders did show interest in Rasul Douglas, but Rasul Douglas ended up choosing the Miami Dolphins instead, and I'll be honest, I don't really blame him. The Raiders gave up on him. He had one of the best years of his career, and maybe he didn't see the fit exactly for Las Vegas. The good news, though, to me is that means that we're at least in the cornerback market, and we need to be because this might be one of the worst cornerback rooms in the National Football League. Darian Porter has not looked good this offseason. Kai Blue Kelly, I want him to be good, but I don't know if Kai Blue Kelly makes a lot of 53-man rosters on a lot of other teams, if I'm being transparent. DeCamerion Richardson, he's been an outside guy. They like his athletic ability. Darnay Holmes, I ended up keeping, but there's a part of me that wonders, could this organization decide to keep Greedy Vance over him? And I wouldn't be mad about that situation if they did. I think keeping Greedy Vance makes sense the same logical way that it made sense to keep Isaiah Pola-Mao, UDFA, back in 2022 because you believe he's going to get better and better and better. And when you've seen Greedy Vance play this offseason, you could tell he's gotten better and better and better. But to me, I'm going to end up keeping 5 corners because this team is also going to use a lot of safeties at nickel, which you've seen all preseason and all offseason long. Let's go to that safety room. And Jeremy Chin, lock. Isaiah Pola-Mao, lock. Lonnie Johnson Jr. is injured, but that's going to be somebody that I believe that this team ends up hanging on to. For Trey Taylor and Thomas Harper, I think if Harper would have been healthy, he would have made this team. And for Chris Smith was really battling, and I give him a lot of credit because Smith was someone that, I've had on 53-man rosters. I've featured him not on 53-man rosters. But to me, he showed up in that final preseason game. He showed up in that second half preseason game. And, they really put him out on the field a lot. They tested him, and he didn't have that good first preseason. He was one of my biggest losers. But to me, when you face adversity, that's what Pete Carroll wants to see. That's what I want to see. And I think Smith showed you that he could handle the pressure. And for that reason, I'm going to end up putting him on this 53-man. So really the final question really came down to, do I want to keep Lonnie Johnson? Because I do think that Terrell Edmunds is going to end up making this team, and he was somebody that was playing a lot of, starting free safety reps. He was kind of playing in that Lonnie Johnson Jr. role, and you saw Lonnie playing like that big nickel is what I've been calling it a lot of offseason. I've been playing that big safety overall, and that's where Terrell Edmunds fits in. But I do think they're going to end up keeping Chris Smith. I'll admit, Smith to me is probably one of the interesting options of, could the Raiders decide to move on from him if they want to go out and add another player before roster cuts or, even after roster cuts? Let's put a bow on this show. Raiders special teams depth chart. Obviously, we're going to keep Carlson, A.J. Cole, Jacob Bobenmoyer. But if you look over there at punt return, kick return, that's why, people were asking, Mitch, could the signing of Amari Cooper be bad news for Tre Tucker? Tre Tucker's staying, and he's staying because of what he offers you everywhere else besides a wide receiver. In terms of McCormick, in terms of Bachman, I don't think that they're going to end up making this team because they like the value that Dylan Laube is going to be able to provide them in special teams. So to put a bow on my 53-man, Carlson, A.J. Cole, and then the long snapper, Jacob Bobenmoyer. But I know this, and I do this show all the time, and, this is a hard day for a lot of NFL players. It's a hard day, for me personally. I mean, I know some of these guys personally. I know they've been busting their tail, but I got a job to do, and I want you as fans to know that I don't want you to ever be afraid to speak your opinion. I don't want you to ever be afraid to let me know what you're thinking down in the comments section. That's how this show works. So I want to know from you, who did I leave off my 53-man roster list? My few answers in terms of my 6 guys that I really wanted to be able to keep coming up here. And it's Alex Bachman, Will Putnam, Cody Lindenberg, Zach Carter, Thomas Harper, Greedy Vance. I could probably also throw in Laki Tassi into this equation as well. I would say that these were the players that were the most difficult for me to move on from. I battled with it mentally for quite some time, but I just couldn't quite find a spot for them on the roster. Coming up next here on the show, my practice squad projection. And what's really difficult about a practice squad projection is, a lot of times we want to just be able to keep all the best players and put them on our practice squad, but that's not really how it typically works because all of our best players that we don't end up keeping usually hit waivers and teams will end up claiming them. But essentially what I tried to do today is I just tried to put my best foot forward in terms of who I would want on the Raiders practice squad. I'll also go over some of the rules if you don't know what the practice squad rules are. I do got to give a shout out, though, to my Noti gang, Matt R., Lazaro, Rudy, Rory, and Michael. Shout out to y'all for pulling up to the Raiders Report. I greatly appreciate each and every one of you. And if you're like, Mitch, how do I get a shout out on a future show? Got to be subscribed. Try to be one of the very first people that comments on a video that I drop. That's my Noti gang. Those are the people that I know that are here every single day. And it's important to me because those are people that I see every day down in the comments. When I push out a video and y'all are in there, I see y'all in there, right? Like, think about when you go to a party. You probably remember the first 5 to 10 people that you dap up at that party. When there's like 100, 200, 300 people at that party, you're like, shit, man, I don't know who the hell I saw. Well, that's why I do this. So let's now go to the Raiders practice squad. And the Raiders' size, you can keep 16 players on the squad. Because of the International Pathway Program player, we are allowed to keep 17, and it has to be Laki Tassi. Also, though, there are 10 spots for players with 2 or less seasons, so you can't just keep all these other veterans on your practice squad. It's meant to develop younger players. It's meant to develop younger talent, and if I'm being transparent with you, if I'm Pete Carroll and John Spytek, think about it, that's the way I'm doing this. I'm trying to keep young players. I'm trying to build for the future. So what I decided to do here is I decided to keep only 7 players from an offensive standpoint because I'm more confident in our offense than I am the defense. So the 7 players that I ended up keeping on offense are Sincere McCormick, Shedrick Jackson, Alex Bachman, Quadir Ishmael, Carter Runyon, Will Putnam, Dalton Wagner. I should also mention when I first designed this show, I was keeping Laki Tassi in my 53-man. So Tassi is going to be another player that he would be on offense. I just want to be very, very clear on that. And because of that, we're going to be able to keep 17 players. So technically, the Raiders keep 8 players with Laki Tassi. Now let's go to the defensive side of the football. Andre Carter's got to be the top guy that we bring back. Ja Joyner, Cody Lindenberg are where I'm going to put a lot of my concentration. And then you might notice that star next to Zach Carter. He's one of the only players that I'm going to end up keeping that has at least 2 or more years of NFL experience, but still, he's going to just be a solid rotation dude and somebody that we'd be able to bring up from time to time because you are allowed to bring up players on game days, and there's going to be some names on this list that I think that could happen to. For a guy like Tre Taylor, I don't know if he'll end up coming back to the practice squad. I've spoke to some sources close to him, and there are some other NFL teams that are interested in him, one being the Baltimore Ravens, so please keep an eye out on that. But that is my Raiders practice squad for defense and for offense for the Silver and Black. Friendly reminder again, I'm going to be heading out of here. I'm going to be going live in a few hours. We're going to be talking about all the NFL news that's happening today. There's a lot of shit that's going down, and as soon as the Raiders make that announcement on all the players that they're cutting, if my math is correct, they got to move on from 20 guys today. They cut 18 yesterday. And if you didn't see that video, go check it out with all the other craziness that happened from Chugs, from me. I'll see you guys here in a few hours on the Raiders Report.